With a little over a month before President Trump's inauguration, what can we expect for his second term? Hello, I'm Anand Naidu, and this is The Heat. President-elect Donald Trump held a press conference on Monday. It started as an announcement on investments in the United States, but turned into over an hour-long session ranging over a myriad topics. CGTN's Jim Spellman has details.
In his first press conference since winning the election in November, President-elect Donald Trump touched on a wide-ranging set of topics and took reporters' questions. Joining him at his Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida was the CEO of SoftBank. The Japanese venture capital firm announced plans to invest $100 billion in the U.S. over the next 4 years, focusing on the AI sector, aiming to create 100,000 U.S. jobs.
This historic investment is a monumental demonstration of confidence in America's future, and it will help ensure that artificial intelligence, emerging technologies, and other industries of tomorrow are built, created, and grown right here in the USA.
And Trump promised to fast-track approval processes for firms investing $1 billion or more in the U.S. Trump addressed some of the ongoing global conflicts, saying he's confident tensions in the Middle East will improve soon, while pushing Hamas to release prisoners before he's sworn in on January 20th. He also says he will try to make a deal between Ukraine and Russia to end the ongoing war, saying he would push Ukraine's president to negotiate.
We should be very prepared to make a deal. That's all. Got to be a deal. No, got to be a deal. Too many people being killed. That is a war that's hard. Too many people. Got to make a deal. And Putin has to make a deal.
What deal? Do you think?
Putin has to make a deal, and Putin would have never gone in if I was president.
On domestic issues, Trump defended some of his controversial cabinet nominees who face tough confirmation battles on Capitol Hill. He also said he has a, quote, warm spot for social media platform TikTok, claiming the app helped him connect with young voters. The president-elect said he's open to pardoning New York City Mayor Eric Adams, a Democrat, who's facing federal corruption charges, saying the mayor has been treated unfairly. And he criticized a congressionally mandated plan put in place by the Biden administration to sell off unused parts of the border wall from Trump's first term. He threatened to fire federal workers who are still working from home and said he is considering privatizing the U.S. Post Office. And Trump also claimed he intends to sue an Iowa newspaper that published a poll showing he trailed Democratic nominee Kamala Harris by 3 percentage points. He went on to win the state by 13 points. Jim Spellman, CGTN, Washington.
It's time to bring in our guests. From Tampa, Florida, Adolfo Franco is an attorney and Republican strategist. Gene Rossi is a former assistant United States attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia. He joins us from Alexandria. Jadan Horyn is a political analyst. He joins us from Sao Paulo in Brazil. And from Maryland, Joseph Williams is a former senior editor at U.S. News and World Report. Welcome to all of you. Adolfo, let me start off with you. This was not billed as a news conference. The president was, or the president-elect rather, was there to talk about this investment by SoftBank, but it turned into a news conference, and as we heard our reporters say, he covered a wide range of subjects, from resuming construction of the border wall to vaccines to the conflict in Ukraine and the continuing humanitarian crisis in Gaza as well. What were your main takeaways from this news conference, and did you get a sense of where the president is heading in the first few months of his new administration?
I sure did. But what a contrast, I think, for the American people to see this president, unscripted, for over an hour, as you've noted, who was supposed to talk about investments, which of course he did, and reinvesting in America, making America great again by attracting foreign investment, creating jobs at home. Then he took a wide range of questions on international, domestic issues, without any notes, unscripted. Compared to the incumbent president of the United States, anybody would look at this and say, what an enormous difference now we have in leadership. Not only the mastering of the issues, but a person who's competent and able to address these questions, unafraid to do so, and of course, fully informed. But the takeaways are the following. It's great that we have a second term, and it's great that we've had actually a 4-year period to reflect on why the country needs to now dramatically change. he's had now the experience. What this, this says to me in terms of this press conference is the president has a very ambitious, precise agenda. I think not only will focus very much on tax, domestic reform, investment, energy, border control immediately. I think you will see this. I know a lot of it was on the international front, where he has, as he said during this press conference, when he was president, we had 4 years of peace. And these things, for example, the invasion of Ukraine, which I believe would never have taken place had he been president. So, and of course, his record in the Middle East is stellar. What he'd done with the Abraham Accords and his relationship, he made reference to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and a clear warning to Hamas that if hostages are not returned, as he said, hell will have to be paid. Similar to what happened when Ronald Reagan was elected, our hostages were returned actually the moment that President Reagan was inaugurated. Yeah. So I think this is a fresh start. He's absolutely right when he said this will be the golden era for America, because we're going to unleash the power of the American people independent and put the country first. So I thought it was a terrific start to what will be an administration with now an experience that he now has under his belt to make it even more effective than his first term.
Joseph Williams, President-elect Trump has made a lot of promises, during the election campaign as well as after he was elected. I mean, he's talking about budget cuts, lowering taxes, ending conflicts, massive investments in the United States. He's also talked about deporting millions of undocumented migrants. So what are your expectations from this incoming administration? I mean, are these realistic? Is he going to be able to do this?
Well, I think a lot of them are about as realistic as his promise to build a wall and have Mexico pay for it. I mean, clearly that didn't happen, and I think that we all know the reason why, because as soon as it came out of his mouth, we kind of were like, huh? How do you get a sovereign foreign government to pay for something that you're building? And it didn't happen. It probably will never happen, and we're not even talking about that anymore. And I also find it kind of ironic that President Trump was talking about American investment, but he wasn't standing there with the head of Goldman Sachs or Citibank or JP Morgan. He was standing there with the head of SoftBank, an overseas corporation that's going to invest in America. If we're going to make America truly great again, isn't it about time that we had American investors and American capital do that? And I also got a lot of hints that it's going to be more of the same. We've seen this movie before. There's going to be a lot I mean, the indication of the chaos is already there. We're seeing with these cabinet picks that there's a chaos factor that's already at work. So I expect that some of these these promises won't become reality, and that may or may not matter depending on the mood of the country.
Jadan Horyn, there's something that Trump has pointed out. He says there's one major difference in the way he is being treated now compared to the reception he got when he was elected in 2016. In the first term, he said, everybody wanted to fight against me, but now everybody wants to be my friends. In fact, there was an opinion piece in the Wall Street Journal today, written, I think, by its editor, in which he said that there was a meeting with tech giants with Trump in 2016, and during that meeting Trump was seeking their approval, but now you see all these tech leaders going to Trump seeking his approval. Do you get the sense that something has changed, that he's getting a warmer reception this time around?
Yeah, I think the zeitgeist is completely different. 2016 was almost like an immune response by the system against what they saw as an outsider, an invader, and the 4 years have kind of inoculated the immune system of the country and of the body politic towards most of the excesses of Trumpism. In fact, what we see even today is the media, for the most part, is getting into the business of actually reporting on the news around it, except for obviously the hyper-partisan media. And there's a lot less of the outrage, because with a popular vote mandate, it's a lot harder to delegitimize a president who has been chosen by the American people. That all being said, I think what is really interesting is that, a lot of these CEOs, a lot of these business leaders, a lot of those in the policy shops and on Capitol Hill aren't looking at it as like a benign resignation, but rather an opportunity. On issues like the Department of Government Efficiency, we have Senator Sanders and Ro Khanna, congressman from California, writing op-eds saying, hey, we'll get on board if you guys eliminate waste, fraud, abuse, and audit the Department of Defense. I mean, and we know that Donald Trump has no problem with unorthodox ideas in working with people who, in any other way, he would probably, or any other Republican probably would not. And so in that respect, I think people are saying, okay, if we take this issue by issue, we can get back to the way bipartisanship used to be in the United States, which was issue by issue, taking the politician rather than their rhetoric.
All right. Joseph Williams, I just want to get your opinion on what Jadan said about the media. I mean, do you think there is a recognition now by the media that this is a president-elect who's got a solid mandate? The people have spoken. The will of the people will now be exercised.
Well, I think that it's hard to ignore that Jeff Bezos has issued him congratulations. The owner of Washington Post has contributed to his inaugural fund. Joe and Mika of Morning Joe went down to talk to Trump shortly after the election. And now you have ABC News settling out of court for $15 million paid to Donald Trump for George Stephanopoulos having a brain burp on the air. So I think clearly the media has decided to treat him differently. I think the media did everything they could to talk about what Trump represents and what his record is, and the American people clearly weren't interested, or they decided that it didn't matter because the price of eggs were too high. But it's kind of disturbing to me, mainly because the press is supposed to be the watchdog. I mean, we're supposed to be the ones holding power to account, and if you're going down there and basically kissing Donald Trump's ring or settling a court case that could have been won, that's not a very encouraging sign for how democracy is supposed to work.
Okay,
well,
let me go to Gene Rossi on that.
Before you get to Gene, if I could, because I want to comment on this as well very quickly before my friend Gene speaks. No, you're not a watchdog. You're a partisan bunch of people, according to the U.S. News. You're completely in the tank for the Democratic Party. 92% of journalists are Democrats. The American people wasn't just the price of eggs. It was all the other failed policies. They weren't buying the Democrat propaganda that's in mainstream media. The realization, my friend Joseph, is look at the ratings for CNN and MSNBC.
Okay.
They're going bust. They're going bust because they're propaganda. That's what the American people reacted against.
All right, let me go to Gene. Gene, let's look at the legal implications of this decision by ABC News, which is a big American television network, their decision to pay Trump $15 million to settle that lawsuit after the network on one of its very popular programs falsely accused him of committing rape. We know that the president is very critical of the media. He has been since he entered politics. But what are the implications of this? And we know that there are others lining up now with similar lawsuits.
First off, I've got to do a shout out for my friend Adolfo, and I agree with about 85% of what he said.
Go ahead, Gene.
And I can't see everybody, but I can hear your voices. Here's what I take from the media. And don't forget that Fox News settled for almost $1 billion for its false accusations about the big lie and things like that. But I'm going to throw darts at all the members of the media because I'm a lawyer, a white-collar defense attorney. I was a prosecutor for 30 years. And I think the media has to be careful. When they say something, whether it's good or bad towards an individual, they have to back it up. And opinion's okay, the First Amendment is okay, but when you make an allegation like rape, like Stephanopoulos did, that is just downright disgraceful what he did. But I throw my darts at all the media because they shoot first, aim later, and even when they aim, they miss. And that really bothers me as a prosecutor and a defense attorney who tries to be accurate and be a soldier of the court. But I just want to say this about the election. There are two numbers that are sticking in my head. 49.81% and 48.43%. That's President Trump's number of the popular vote and Kamala Harris. That's not a mandate. That is a win. The Democrats got to lick their wounds. There's no cheating. We lost. We got beat. And we should accept that. But let's not call it a mandate. I remember 1984, Adolfo, 1984. I worked for Mondale. That was a mandate. Ronald Reagan cleaned the Democrats' clock. and he won with almost 60%. That was a mandate, very impressive. And the biography by Max Boot about Reagan is one of the best. But let's not call it a mandate. Donald Trump has to be careful. He cannot get intoxicated. He doesn't drink, but he can't get figuratively intoxicated by the sense that he has a mandate. He has to be very careful. He can be a great president his second term, but he can't act like he got a Ronald Reagan mandate in 1984.
So, Gene, when you say it's not a mandate, does that mean that Donald Trump has to perhaps temper some of his more ambitious plans?
Yes, and he will. Donald Trump is a deal maker. He talked about the deal with Ukraine and Russia. He's a deal maker. He likes results. And you can say a lot about things about Donald Trump, and I can for sure, but he likes to work out deals. And when you work out deals, you got to give up things. And I predict this, in the next 9 months, there's the possibility that President Trump, and I commend his victory, President Trump has the ability to work across the aisle and become a second-term president that will have a record he can be proud of. If he becomes a partisan, he's gonna open those wounds, and he's got to remember 48.43% voted against him.
Okay. Jadan Horyn, I'm going to get to something else that's been in the news. It's been causing a lot of controversy as well, and that is political pardons. Trump says he will pardon the convicted January 6th rebels on his first day in office. In fact, he said he'll do it in the first hour. Has the power of the pardon, which was meant to be an act of clemency, now become too politicized?
I think this always happens. Outgoing administrations, especially when they switch parties, the incoming administration wants to understand the legal rationale. I believe the Clinton administration is famous for pardoning a mega donor who was convicted, and it got quite a bit of scrutiny in the early years of the Bush administration and caused a lot of consternation for Republicans in a call back then for the pardon power to be either circumscribed or, investigated, some kind of congressional panel. And then, things moved on. Presidents do, in fact, under our Constitution, have a pardon power. And as of yet, the Supreme Court and really any other branch of government has not seen fit to limit it. And that gives a lot of hypotheticals, including wide-scale pardons for things, or clemency for drug offenders in the tens of thousands, for those that enter the country illegally. I mean, there's a lot of things theoretically that could happen, but the limiting principle is always, will it be egregious to the American people? And it will be something that the other political party will be able to do for their favors. And in general, in the American system, that has limited our presidents to doing it for what they see maybe, or to give favors to those that supported them as either their first actions or their last. So yes, it's politicized. Of course it's politicized, because in this case, the administration is switching from one to the other. But it's not any different than it has been over the last almost 250 years of American history.
Right. Adolfo, as Jadan says, there are not many constraints on who a president can pardon or for what reason. I mean, if we look at President Biden, he pardoned his son Hunter after saying that he will not pardon his son Hunter. There was an outcry over that, even from some Democrats. And now we just hear in the past week that one of the men pardoned is a former judge in Pennsylvania who was convicted in the so-called Kids for Cash scam. This is one of the judges. There were two involved, but one of the judges who jailed children in return for money from for-profit prison corporations. Should there be more controls over what a president can do?
I think it's going to be difficult, but they are pushing the limits on this, particularly on the scope now with the preemptive pardons. Yes, you can go back to President Nixon, but that was very focused on the Watergate matter, particularly on the son, not only because he broke a promise, the so-called democracy president that respected the system. He, by the way, attacked the system. He said his son was persecuted by his own Justice Department. Those were the president's words. But the scope of these is what's alarming, and that 1,300 and the rest of it. These particular cases are puzzling. You're right on the judge who was profiting from really the child enslavement and sharply criticized by Governor Shapiro. Senator Klobuchar, another Democrat, sharply criticized that, and of course, the other pardons. But the limiting of that power, I think, I agree with Jadan. By the way, all three guests are my friends and they're terrific, but hey, Gene, it's great to see you back. I agree with, of course, what Jadan has said and what Gene said largely about, again, the impact of the election. But this pardon issue, I think, is going to do something. I usually leave the philosophy here to Jadan, but I think it's going to undermine confidence in government and the idea that things are actually corrupt, and maybe set a bad precedent in the future that you just pardon everyone in your administration or yourself even could be the next step. And that will further erode confidence in the system. I don't think this is what was contemplated on the pardon use, particularly what's happened in the last few years. And I think public outcry will continue to grow.
Okay. Gene, what's your view on this? I mean, you have talked about the Hunter Biden pardon. You said that the gun charges were petty, but that and bogus, but the criminal tax charges were justified.
And I want to agree with Adolfo on this. I think President Biden really tarnished his legacy by breaking the promise that he made 3 or 4 times during the election that he wouldn't pardon his son. And then he attacked the Department of Justice. That, I don't know who was advising him, but that was bad. But here's my view on Hunter Biden. I do think the gun charge was pitiful. It was something that no prosecutor reasonable would ever have brought. However, when they offered him the misdemeanor for the taxes, I was apoplectic. I worked for the tax division for the Department of Justice for 11 years. And when you evade and avoid paying $2.1 million in taxes, that's not a misdemeanor. That's a big felony. And they were going to give him a misdemeanor, so he was treated with kid gloves at the beginning. He eventually pleaded guilty. But I represented, last comment I want to make, I represented an oath keeper. He was the first one to enter the Capitol on January 6th. He went to trial 6 weeks. He was found guilty of 6 felonies. He was 21 years old. He had autism, young kid. He got caught up in the moment, no violence. That's a person who deserves a pardon.
Gene, one other thing, the pardon that President Biden granted to his son Hunter, it covers anything and everything from 2014. Why did he go back that far?
It's his son. And he's worried the Department of Justice may reopen those cases. I really believe that was a bad move to completely pardon his son, going back to when they invented fire. That was a bad move.
Joseph Williams.
But let's add something, because the question is an excellent question. He goes back to 2014, and this is why there's a lack of confidence in the system, to cover up the Biden family scheme that has been alleged. So in other words, it's a way not to get to President Biden himself and his brother James. And this is what's alarming and undermining confidence in our system.
Yeah, okay. Joseph Williams, there's also quite a debate going on in the White House right now about the granting of preemptive pardons to people who are seen as being critical, who are seen as people who've gone after Trump during the Biden administration. I mean, is this going to happen? I mean, would it set a huge precedent if a group of people are granted preemptive pardons?
Well, look, I think up is down these days. Up is down, right is wrong. People who get pardoned shouldn't be pardoned. People who should be pardoned really aren't. And this, to me, is evidence that the system has never been pristine. The system has always had 2 tiers of justice. Preemptive pardons may be a good look, maybe it's not. It depends on whose ox is being gored. Basically, if you're a Democrat, you're thinking about the fact that President-to-be Donald Trump has vowed to he's vowed to get back at his enemies. Sorry, I'm a little bit worked up here, but he's vowed to take revenge and use the instruments of power to do so. That is patently wrong. It should not happen, yet there's a fear that it actually might. 2 other quick things. The first is, I think your guests who are criticizing the media are conflating opinion with fact. For a fact, we do not publish stuff that we know is wrong. I think you're tarring everybody with a broad brush for a brain mistake that George Stephanopoulos had on an air. George has not been traced as a journalist. He was a political operative before he came on air. I think, secondly, you need journalists, and you don't really know how badly you need them until things get wrong. So I hesitate to, I would challenge either of your guests to find fact-based information on something that the journalists got wrong in the 2024 election that they got factually wrong. We're not talking about polls. We're not talking about opinion. We're talking about facts. Facts on the ground. And finally, I think that...
You're not a journalist if you're former Obama officials masquerading as journalists and selective reporting and having 92%
you're not talking about the working journalist like the type that I am,
and only
that I have to guarantee that all my facts are accurate.
Okay, one at a time, please. Okay, Adolfo, a moment, Adolfo. Go ahead, Joseph.
That is a lack of accountability.
And this is just absolutely ridiculous. It's patently absurd what you're saying.
It isn't.
I'm glad you're my friend because I'd hate to see you for an enemy.
No, those are the facts. It's selective. You know, the New York Times itself has practically said it's abandoning reporting and it's doing advocacy. They're taking the point of view and they're presenting it as factual journalism.
It just so happens that the facts don't comport with your belief system. And I think that's where
the fact is, you know, Sean Hannity on Fox News starts the program saying, "I'm not a journalist. I'm an opinion
maker." Right, as he should.
The rest of the CNN.
Okay, I want to move on. Jadan, I want to move on to something before we close. We've got a couple of minutes left, and let's talk about Trump's nominees, his picks for his cabinet. I mean, there's been criticism that these picks are being dictated by loyalty rather than expertise and experience. Do you think the president has the votes in the United States Senate to get his picks confirmed?
Well, I think we can separate that. I think every president chooses nominees both on experience and on loyalty. And so in that respect, you know, I do have to, you know, point that out. Secondarily, the United States Senate is an organ that is not really beholden to the president or the presidential, you know, the president-elect. And in that respect, I would say that when it comes to particular nominees, there are those that will face more difficulty. Kash Patel, Tulsi Gabbard, and those are, you know, one, because incendiary things that have been said in the past about the FBI, you know, worries those that are institutionalists, and for the other, because of questions about loyalty to the United States.
Okay, and we have to leave it there. We've run out of time. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That's it for The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C.